Hi, good evening. Today is March 8th, 2026, and it is 11:50 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and this is demo D121. 121. For this demo, I have a series of things I would like to talk about, which are a collection of legal topics and technology topics. But these are legal topics on a different realm of law, other than what I've been talking about the last few months, which has been more on the family law and constitutional rights and those things. So this is a different area, but I think it's also interesting. And I mean, not because I think so, but because of the things that have happened recently in the last few days. So this demo memorializes things that have happened over the last 3 days, I think. So from March 6th to March 9th to March 8th, 2026. So 6, 7, and 8. Give me just a second to look at my talking points. Yes, so I'm gonna do something that I never do, and I never do this because of principle, right? Like it's a longer story, but I want to give you a quick, I don't know, comment to give you context, right? So of where I'm coming from with these things. So I want to say that I was employed by Google Search, by Google, like the corporation, the company, and I was working on their search team. I worked on their search team for almost, I don't know, 9 years, a little bit more than 9 years, I think. And I was a staff software engineer, right? Which is, it's kind of in the engineering ladder, it's one of the top positions, right? And I had, at Google, what I consider a pretty successful, tenure. And during my time there, I was named as the sole inventor of 2 different patents that are registered with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, attributed to Google, but I am the sole inventor in those patents. And this is going to be all relevant in a second, okay? But I'm telling you this to, kind of, give you an idea, right, of my technical background, because the things I'm going to talk about here are very technical, right? And you may think that these are, crazy statements or, unfounded hypotheses or, you may think that these things don't hold water, right? But I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying either that because I worked at Google or because I already invented 2 patents that these things automatically hold water. I'm not saying that. I think ultimately, right, the judges of that are going to be the U.S. officials or officers that, have the job of determining that. And I'm talking about officers in the U.S. Patent Office, and you will see what I say this in a second. But they're going to be the ones that are going to be tasked with determining, whether these things hold water or not. And ultimately the industry, right? But and the markets, right? But in the context of this conversation, right, I would like you to be the judge, right? Like judge for yourself, but I also need to give you that context, right? Because the things I'm going to talk on the technical side of things, on the engineering side of things, are a bit, they may seem to you a bit extreme, right? Because these are topics that are not usually discussed on the wild, because precisely of the nature of the topics, right? So I wanted to give you that little bit of background about my background, so you have context, right? And you have a baseline, right? When you make your own judgment. Now, let me tell you why I never say this, right? Because, I could say this all the time, right? But I make the point to never say it. And this is because of something that I learned while I was employed by Goldman Sachs. And I learned this from a gentleman by the name of Michael Lee, who was the chief compliance officer, I think, at the time. I think he was promoted to partner, and he's a partner right now, but at the time he was chief compliance officer. So I mean, that thing that he told me that day, it really is stuck with me. And he of course, he said it in a different context, right? But he said, we were in a meeting and there was a problem, right? That they were addressing, right? I was there for a different reason, not to address that problem, but I overheard the conversation, right? And they said something to the effects that at the firm we don't assess legal risk or we don't make legal assessments based on reputation. And that is really profound. Like if you think about it, it's a really profound view on how to approach a problem, right? Because what he was saying in that moment was that regardless of who you are, regardless of what you've done with your life, regardless of even of the accomplishments you had during your career in the past, the positions you held, like regardless of everything, the legal situation is the legal situation, right? Like, and you cannot bias your view of the situation based on who is presenting or who is involved in the situation, right? So that on itself, when I've heard it, right, it was profound to me. Sorry, I had a bit of a situation here. 1 second, okay? Yes. So that's the idea, right? So to not make assessments based on reputation. And he said it in the context of compliance risk, but I think this is a more general concept, right? Seems obvious to me. So that's why I never say these things, right? Because I don't want you to, or anybody who listens to these things, to automatically assume that what I'm saying is correct because I, had a certain patent written years ago, right? Like that has nothing to do with this. But in this context, because of the things I'm going to say, I feel like it's important context that I need to give you, right? So that's what I said. So let's start with, my strategy shift over the last few days, right? So, and I'm going to narrate here a series of events that happened, right? So this is supposed to be like a long, kind of longer conversation, right? Than usual, right? So I imagine this is going to take at least 90 minutes of your time. Mentioning this in case you have something else to do, like save this for when you have the time, right? This started because of the observation last week that I documented before, in which my camera system in the car captured Zuleima or Gloria taking photos of the car, right? And I understood that she was still being weaponized, right, by the judges. And then I recorded demo 120, I think it was, and I mentioned all this, right? And also the informant told me exactly what was the vector of attack, what was the case that they were going to fabricate, and even the supporting evidence that they were going to bring from Goldman Sachs. All this is recorded in demo 120. So when I saw this, right, I mean, because at this point, and they created a traffic accident when I was going to file with the Supreme Court of the United States last week. And now they created another traffic citation, right? So now I have another legal case. So it became obvious to me that the judges are not really understanding what I'm saying, right? I mean, there is a communication problem here. Like I say things and they get intelligence from what I say, but they are not grasping the gravity of the situation. Because if they were, they would be proactively reaching to the authorities. They wouldn't be keeping, this effort to try to put me in jail. So I understood there is a communication problem here. I mean, I have a communication problem. Like what I'm saying is getting to the judges, but filter, right? So this renewed understanding on the situation on my side brought me to wanting to create a new strategy, right? Like the need I recognized is that I need to be able to get this information to the judges unfiltered. Okay, that's my goal with the strategy I'm going to describe to you. So I started thinking, how do I do this? Because the problem is, that the Venezuelan intelligence and the Russians and the Chinese and all these intelligence organizations that are operating here illegally, they have this tier system that I described before, right? And I even described how it works. But so what they do is that they have the information that they steal compartmentalized. So they send to the judges only the legal topics, right? While the intelligence topics, they send it to China or to Russia, right? And that way the judges don't have to know everything, right? That's the idea. So when I see this, I think, well, I have to adapt my strategy. What I have to do is to bring this battle, the technical battle, to the legal field, right? That way, because, if I talk about legal things, the Venezuelan intelligence is not going to be able to understand what I'm saying. If I talk about intelligence, they will understand. But if I talk about something else, like that is legal, a legal topic, they won't be able to read those documents. It will be, not understandable to them. It would be like a foreign language, right? Even if they translate it to Spanish, right? But they won't understand exactly what it says. So they will have to engage the lawyers and the attorneys, right? And these will get my technical information to the lawyers and the judges, right? Which will expose them to the serious crimes that these people are committing, right? And they are part of the same organization, so they will probably back off, right? So the next question is, okay, how do I bring the technical topics to a legal conversation? How do I turn these technical topics into a legal conversation? And this is what was a game changer for me, because I realized that I remembered that the intersection between technology and law is, you guessed it, patent law, right? And that's why I was telling you that I named as a sole inventor in 2 different Google patents that I invented. I made those inventions more than a decade ago. So, the strategy seemed obvious to me at that point. What I have to do is to translate what I'm saying into, these ideas that I have into patents, right? And the way to do that is, for example, if I design a countermeasure, I can patent that as an invention, right? And that would create a patent application filing. And the Venezuelan intelligence won't be able to understand that, because those filings are complex technical documents. When our patents about technology, right? And so they will be forced to pass that to the judges to be able to understand what they say, right? And then the judges will read it, and the judges will understand, because, well, they have, litigation experience, right? And they've been involved in patent litigations, like they've been judges in patent litigations, right? Particularly the federal judges, right? So it lowers the barrier, right, for the judges to understand the gravity of the situation that they're getting themselves into, right, with the Venezuelan intelligence. So that's what I did. I started filing for patents on that way, right? Like the countermeasures and the technologies that I developed, I started patenting them, right? Filing the applications, right? The patents, of course, those processes take a long time to go through. It's not something that happens in a day, right? The patent application process is a long process, but it's ongoing, right? Yeah, I already started it, right? So I started filing those patent applications on Friday, the 6th, right? March 6, 2026. And this triggered a series of events that I'm going to describe later in a bit. But first, let me go through the different patent applications. I'm going to talk about all of them, but something interesting happened. This resulted in a different situation, right? Completely different situation that is a game changer, and I'm going to describe what that is, right? And that's where the technical expertise that I have is relevant to the conversation. So, but before we get into that, let me tell you the other problems these patents applications solve for me, because that's not the only problem, right? So one is that, it allows me to communicate with the judges, right, as I described before. The second problem is that it also allows me to communicate with authorities. I mean, with FinCEN, the OFAC, the DEA, and the FBI. Why? Well, because if I publish a book like the ones that I've been publishing until this point, and I send it to the FBI, right? I mean, there is a certain. I will have to be very lucky if somebody from the FBI has the technical background to understand it, because these are things about search, about information retrieval that may not be the things that they usually work on, right, every day. So this creates a situation where the document itself might be unparsable, right, or might be, in a way, hard to understand. And the same applies with FinCEN, with, other things, right? With the OFAC, with the DEA, right? But you see, the patent applications are in a way documents that are in a way standardized. I mean, the whole patenting process and system is based precisely on a standardization of the content. I mean, all those patents are standardized. I mean, the applications, right? The way the diagrams are built, the way things are numbered, all those things are standardized. And this standardization makes it so that, if somebody from the DEA sees this patent, what are they going to do? They're going to get an attorney to read and interpret this for them, like an intellectual property attorney, right? And then they will make a determination, well, is this person crazy or is this real, right? And at that point, it's game over, right? So the standardization helps, right, get this message clearly, unfiltered to the authorities. To all of them, right? The FBI, the OFAC, the FinCEN, the DEA, the DOJ, right? So this is really a nuclear weapon. One second. Yes. The other problem that this solves is that this standardization precisely also helps me communicate these topics to the public, right? Because within the public, within the population of the planet, there are people that are technical, that are engineers, right? And if they read this in this standardized format, they will understand very quickly what this means, right? And the implications that this has. So it's really a weapon, right? And the fourth benefit is that this gives me, because imagine for a second, right, that this is why I want to talk about a specific set of patents. I have to tell you, in total, so far, I filed 22 patents in 3 days. And you may ask yourself, well, how did you do it? Well, I mean, this is kind of a longer conversation, but remember, if you hear the previous demos, you will learn about the legal vaccine pipeline that I developed. This software, it's a distributed computer system that allows me to, produce legal documents. And I mentioned this in one of the earlier demos last year, but what started all this conflict with the Communist Party of China was that I developed a technology that I branded within a company as key opinion leaders. And that technology allowed me to find people by expertise and to rank them, right? This is a complex topic, and I don't want to turn this into a sales speech, but what is relevant to this conversation is that to develop that technology, one of the data sets that I ingested was the corpus of US patents. It had something like 600,000 patents, which contain the patent applications and the actual patents, right? And I've ingested this data set into the key opinion leaders pipeline years ago. This was like 2020, I think, right? So I'm talking about 6 years ago, but I have the snapshot of this data set. So what I did, I created a Frankenstein pipeline with the legal vaccine pipeline, but using also the data set of the patents. And this way, I turned the legal vaccine pipeline basically into a patent drafting machine, right? Arguably, and this is one of the things that I imagine, that I want other people to be the judge of this. Like, I don't want to call it, right? Because I don't, I mean, I will be biased, right? But I would argue this is probably one of the most sophisticated patent drafting or patent application drafters that there could be. I mean, I'm talking about my C7000 cluster powered by this software, by this distributed computer software that I developed using the corpuses of, the corpora of legal documents in the U.S. courts, plus the corpora of the U.S. Patent Office. Arguably, this could be the most potent patent application drafter that there could be in the planet. That would be my argument, right? But of course, I guess this would be the judges of this should be the people in the patent office, right? So anyhow, using this technology, I produced these 22 patent applications in 3 days, okay? Running the cluster basically at 50% capacity. I didn't even have to turn it all the way up. So I produced all these patents, right, for countermeasures and things like that. But I also produce patents for other things, derived from an invention that I devised, some time ago. So what happened was, sorry, there is a truck here, semi-truck, 2 semi-trucks. Sorry. Yes. Hello. Okay. Yes. 1 second. Okay. So yeah. So we're on the patent applications, right? So there is a piece of technology that I devised a while ago. When I saw, I mean, it's not, what happened was, if you look at the previous demos, right, I realized that the Chinese are basically using large objects of color to send signals to the sky, to satellites, right? So, like these particular yellow excavators or the green tractors for, cutting the grass or things like that, right? So they're using those objects to send signals to satellites, right? And they're encoding messages with the directionality of the objects. So I've been thinking about this for a while, right? And I realized this, I had a kind of a moment of clarity, I would call it, right? I thought, well, but the Chinese really are, it's one use of colors, right? But there might be other uses of communication via light, right? And this got me into a path of thinking, how could I use light to communicate? Okay, this is what started this train of thought in my mind. The fact that they're using colors to communicate instead of using radio frequency, right? And they do this because the colors are not regulated, right? Nobody regulates what colors are visible. There are agencies in governments that regulate radio frequency and emissions from radio frequency devices, but nobody's regulating visible light, okay? But anyhow, I've been thinking about this for a while, and at some point, I had an idea. And the idea I had is a novel idea, and this is where I want to talk to you about a technical topic, okay? And I'm going to talk about very technical things here, but bear with me for a second, okay? So the problem I started tackling with, when I started thinking about visible light, was the problem of communication in computers. So one of the big problems in computing today is bandwidth, and especially with the rise of quantum computing, where processing speeds are orders of magnitude above of what we have in traditional computers, right? But the problem is that even if when they talk about quantum computing right now, these days, in 2026, they're talking about the processor, the CPU, right? So they're making the CPU of a quantum computer. But and there's a lot of companies working on this problem, right? Google, IBM, like there's a lot of people working, researching this, right? But they're working on the CPU at this point, the central processing unit. But assume for a second that they accomplish that. I mean, it's still in the works and still has some errors, right? But they're working on error correction and things like that. But assume they pull it off, right? And the processor works without errors, or the error correction becomes perfect. The processor speed is so huge that the problem is not going to be the processor, it's going to be moving that amount of data. How do you move that amount of data out of the processor or into the processor, right? Or into the computer, to another computer. And remember, this is only in the context, I mean, as a civilization right now, we're working on the problem of one quantum computer. Okay? Let me tell you what happened with the traditional computers before, because if you look at history, you will know what will happen after, right? So in traditional computing, the evolution was that first, people worked on the regular computers. People like Steve Jobs and, Bill Gates and, in the 80s, right? But after that, the next evolution was, well, after you have one computer, you connect them to other computers, right? Via the internet, and etc. Or networking technologies in general. But see, this is very interesting. When I was talking about legal topics, like I had the level 2 following me. But as soon as I switched to technical topics, they left me alone. So here in that fact, you can see that at this point, it's the judges, right, who are commanding this on-the-ground operation. Anyhow, what happened after, the next step was distributed computing. Distributed computing is not only connecting multiple computers via a network, but coordinating them, right? Making a huge computational problem be split among multiple computers. Computing the solutions of small chunks of the problem and then putting them together to produce the final solution, right? That's distributed computing. Telling you this because right now our civilization in 2026 is working on the problem of a single CPU of a single quantum computer. But what's going to happen next after that problem is solved is that they're going to start working on distributed quantum computing, right? That's the next logical step. And the problem there is, how do you move that amount of data among multiple quantum computers? Not only one computer, but multiple of them, to be able to coordinate what they're doing, right? You need to move the data around. So here, when I thought of this, I realized, well, the real limitation is our communication or networking infrastructure, right? Because it's based on ones and zeros. It's digital, right? So it's either a 1 or it's either a 0. Like through that Ethernet cable that you connect to your modem, or in general, right, to a networking equipment, it could be fiber optic. It doesn't matter, but it's the same principle. It's zeros and ones in a serial manner. It's sending either zeros or ones, right? If it's a fiber optic cable or fiber, if the light is on, that's a 1. If the light is off, it's a 0, right? And they just do that very quickly, many times per second, and that is the signal, right? That's how they modulate the ones and the zeros that are the digital signal. But you see, this is serial, right? It's a series of ones and zeros. Very fast, but it's still serial, right? And it's only ones and zeros. So thinking about the communication using color, right? I had an idea, right? And I'm gonna describe to you this idea in a way that it's very relatable, I think, right? Like when I ask you to picture this, you will see what I mean. Imagine this setup, right? Imagine you have a big TV, a plasma TV, a television, okay? And in this television, imagine it's an 8K television, right? No, not 4K, but 8K. The resolution is, very granular. The pixels are, it has a lot of pixels. And you also have an 8K camera put right in front of the TV that it's able to capture the entire screen perfectly. Imagine that setup, right? This thing could be used as a super ultra bandwidth cable. Why? Well, because you can use this principle of, color and light to encode information in a way that it's parallel. How? Well, you can make each pixel be a piece of information. So you can imagine, right? What I'm describing is that you can form an image in that screen by arranging these millions of pixels, because 8K resolution has millions of pixels, right? I can't recall exactly how many millions, but like it's a number of millions of pixels, right? So you can arrange these millions of pixels, right, in one image, and each pixel, the position, whether the pixel is on or off, could encode a 1 and 0. Let's start by that. That's the simplest thing, right? Like imagine the image is just only white pixels. So if the pixel is white, that's a 1. If the pixel is black, that's a 0. But in this image, you are putting millions of pixels in just one image, and the camera that you have in front of the TV is able to capture them all. So with computer vision, you can see which pixel is on and which pixel is off, right? Perfect. Now, let's take it a step up, right? Now, imagine the pixels are not only white. You can put colors on the pixels. And these TVs, high-resolution screens and high-fidelity screens, they can encode millions of colors, right? So now, if the pixel is white, that is a 1. If the pixel is blue, that is a 2. If the pixel is 3, that is a... if the pixel is green, that is a 3. If the pixel is pink, that is a 4. You get the idea, right? So depending on the wavelength of the color, it has a different number. So now, out of the sudden, you can encode not only ones and zeros, you can encode millions of numbers in one pixel, right? And you can put millions of pixels side by side together in one image. And this TV, the hypothetical TV I'm describing, can refresh the image 200 times per second, 240 times per second, right? So 240 hertz refresh rate. So this means you can send 240 arrangements of pixels, of millions of pixels in parallel per second. And in each pixel, you can encode thousands, if not millions of states, right? Because you can encode with the color, with the wavelength, and also with the intensity of the pixel. So, if it's 100% brightness, that's one state. If it's red, 100% brightness, that's a state. If it's red, 50% brightness, that's a different state, right? So you see, this creates a massive pipeline of communication. It gets even better because it's not only visible light. You can do the same thing. I mean, in this thing I'm describing to you with the TV, I'm making this example, so it's relatable, right? But in reality, it could be even invisible light. We can go into the infrared spectrum, into the ultraviolet spectrum, and we have more combinations, right? So now, picture this. Imagine that TV, you reduce it to, instead of using a big TV, instead of using a 40-inch OLED screen, you use a, let's say, 5-centimeter screen. I mean, it's still 8K, but miniaturized, right? And the camera, you make it still be an 8K camera, but miniaturized to match the exact size of that screen. And you couple them physically together within, think about it as a pipe or a cable, right? That they connect together, the cable connects together, the camera and this micro TV together in a space without any light coming in from the outside. So kind of a isolated space, right? This would create a perfect conduit for data, and it doesn't require cables. There's no, there is, of course, it only works short range because you have to have, in this situation I'm describing, you have to have the two computers. So the idea here is to pass data from one computer to the other if they're close together, right? By using this cable. But because of the technique I'm describing of encoding the data in parallel, using parallelism of the pixels, refreshing the frames 200 times per second, and using the position of the pixel and the color of the pixel and the intensity of the pixel as encoders for different states, you get a bandwidth. I did the math, right? And my math, might be, it's a theoretical bandwidth that I computed. It might be off a little bit, but I think in this setup I'm describing is around 199 terabytes per second. This is multiple orders of magnitude of what is possible today with the networking technologies we have today in the world. Orders of magnitude, right? So this is, I think, is a game changer. So I patented this idea. And this removes the bottleneck of I/O between two computers. But then I also expanded it, okay? And the same idea, right? So in the CPUs, in the central processing units that we have today, they work with pins. So they have metallic pins and they go into a socket, right? I don't know if you've ever seen one of these things before, but if you haven't, look it up in Google, you will see what I mean. A processor, a chip processor, like an Intel CPU, has, hundreds of pins on the back. And you insert that into a socket that fits every pin perfectly. But every one of those pins is just a cable sending or receiving ones and zeros serially, right? Imagine you replace the back of that CPU with a surface of CMOS sensors, right, that can capture photo emissions. And on the side of the motherboard, you replace the holes for the pins with LEDs. What this gives you is a light socket, right? Where the CPU is receiving pixels of light that can encode colors, and the colors could have multiple states, not only ones and zeros. So you see, this invention takes the CPU bus from being a serial bus to being a massive parallel bus that can encode millions of states per pixel. I mean, this is a massive improvement, right, on the bus speed of the CPUs, which is necessary for quantum computing. You can do the same with the memory modules of the computer. Right, until now, the memory modules have these little indentations made of metal that are really pins, right? And it's the same, right? The communication is serial. You can replace that with an array of photon emitters and photoreceptors. And then you would have an optically attached memory module. Right, so you see what I mean. All this journey of filing the patent to fight with the judges led me on a path to formalize this invention with the U.S. Patent Office, in which basically these patent applications are a blueprint for the next generation of the infrastructure needed for a quantum computing processor to really work. And not only that, to be connectable to other quantum computers, forming probably the first quantum computing cluster. So this is one of those, I think, right? And this is, I don't want to be the judge on this because I will obviously be biased, right? And this is what I was telling you before of my background. Based on my background and the technology background that I have, I see this development and I see a world-changing event. Because it completely changes the landscape of computing. And now I have these applications filed under my name, okay? And I have to tell you, I'll tell you that later, right? Because there's another implication on this. Yes. 1 second. Yes. So, but the other thing, right, is I also filed other applications related to, data logistics that are derived from this, because once you remove that bottleneck, like for example, right now, the reason why our communications are based on the internet mostly is because, or even Ethernet, right? Like even locally within your home, is because this bottleneck in the I/O, right? It is, if you had to wait for a file to copy into a hard drive, you have to wait for hours, right? So you have to be sitting next to the computer for hours. So what you do is you send it over the internet, you upload it to Google Drive, and you can leave your home. And it's uploading for hours, but you are doing something else, right? But if you remove this bottleneck and you can transfer the contents of your entire computer to a hard drive in a matter of half a second, then you don't need to upload it to Google Drive, right? You can just copy it to a drive and take it with you and give it to somebody else, right? And this is important because it is more secure. If you are copying it into a physical drive, the Communist Party of China cannot intercept it. Um, so that's an important development. So I created another series of patents related to data logistics, because once this bottleneck is removed, this opens the door for uh, uh, different type of communication that is asynchronous. Like, for example, if you want to move data even within a data center, right? If you're Google and you want to copy a huge amount of data from one server to another, you could have an automated system that physically copies the data to a cartridge and takes that cartridge with imagine a robot, like a robotic hand, takes the cartridge from one server and puts it into another, and you are transferring petabytes of data in 3 seconds, right? Something that you could not do using any networking equipment today, right? So it also changes the game for how data centers operate. So I also have a set of patents for that, right? For data logistics. So anyhow, I took all these patents and I turned them into a book, and I published the book to establish prior art, right? So the Communist Party of China doesn't come back and say that they invented this, right? So the book is published, it has an ISBN number, and is registered with the Library of Congress. And there's no stronger prior art than this, right? And the patent applications are filed and paid for. I paid the filing fees and everything, right? But here's where things get a little bit more interesting, right? Because my plan with this is to, let me tell you what I did, right? I realized that me being a private citizen, right, with the limited resources I have, even if I hold the patents, like even if the USPTO grants the patents to me, I would have a hard time enforcing those patents against the Communist Party of China. Why? Well, because they have the resources of a country. Or, well, actually, of multiple countries, right? Because at this point, they control a coalition of countries, right? Directly or indirectly. So it would be almost impossible for me to enforce those patents, right? Like if they start violating the patents and creating these interfaces and shipping them to the US, how do I stop them, right? So here, an idea formed in my mind, also based on something that I learned at Goldman Sachs. And I'm telling you these things of Goldman Sachs, not to drop names or anything, but like to show you that I know these things because they taught me these things over the years with all the Russians, right? They brought me to Goldman Sachs to steal Calculado Health, was at that point. But in return, they taught me all these concepts, right? So the concept of alignment, right? I may not have the tools to fight the Communist Party of China on intellectual property lawsuits, but maybe I can create a situation that could align my interest in defending these patents with the interest of a bigger entity that can fight with them in that area, right? So this is what I did. Maybe a bold move. I don't know. Some people might think it's a silly move or stupid. I don't know. Because it's sacrificing a potentially big opportunity, right, in terms of potential contracts or things like that in the future. But what I did was that in the patent applications themselves, I put a language granting a perpetual license of use to the U.S. federal government. Okay, and I made the explicit comment of not including the state governments. Why? Well, because obviously, because of what I've experienced, I can see that the Communist Party of China has the capabilities of corrupting, governors or state judges, right? So they will get around the patent that way. So this only applies to the federal government, the military. So I put certain restrictions into it, right? But the idea is I granted, a perpetual, no-fee license of use to the U.S. federal government in all these patents that are going to be, I think, fundamental for quantum computing. And because, they have an interest in protecting the country. And quantum computing, let me tell you why it's so important. It's because if you have such immense computing power, you can break any encryption key easily, right? So, achieving quantum computing capabilities first is the equivalent in this information warfare that the Chinese Communist Party is advancing against the rest of the world, would be the equivalent of developing the nuclear power first, right? So whoever gets to that point first wins, because they will be able to see the communications of everybody else, including the intelligence agencies of the other side, right? So I anticipate that this will create a situation in which the U.S. government has an interest in enforcing those patents, right? And if the Chinese start violating them, they may even go to I imagine, like, I don't know, I have no idea to know what will happen because I cannot see the future. But maybe they may even go to the extent of seizing the goods, right? If they violate the patents or the patent restrictions, which would be really violating import laws, right? So it's a way of me aligning my interest in defending the technology against this theft, these thieves of technology that are the Communist Party of China. By the way, I learned through this process that there's some lawsuits. I mean, chatting with the AI, I learned that there's some lawsuits that have accused corporations of racketeering based on infringement of patents or stealing technology. So, I mean, this thing of stealing technology, I mean, this is not a new thing. And it's in some legal cases that are landmark cases have been considered even acts of racketeering. So imagine that, right? Yes, 1 second, okay? Yes. So it's a racketeering pattern, right? What they have. I mean, the Communist Party of China, right? With the stealing of the technology. But again, I want to be emphatic when I say that the reason why I'm so interested in defending the technology is not greed. It's not, just they put so much energy into all these crimes that they're committing, and I have the evidence and all that. I'm not concerned about finances or money. But it's more about protecting the citizens, right? Because I see how the Communist Party of China has been in a campaign of enslaving the world using technology. And if they get to develop quantum computing capabilities first, they will definitely enslave us all. So my goal is really to help create a situation in which the U.S. government can enforce these patents to protect people, right? Because otherwise, quantum computer will be used as a weapon, right? And that's why, if you look at the Geo Index, you will see that all the particle accelerators in the world are heavily marking this espionage index that they have. It's because of this, because they're interested in quantum computing because they see that as a weapon of enslavement of entire countries and continents, right? So be careful with that. Yes. So anyhow, that's basically it. So I invite you to please, check out that book because it has a compilation of all the patent applications that I filed. Now, when I started working on these patents on Friday, March the 6th, this triggered an immediate escalation from the Communist Party of China. Physical escalation at my home, right? Like they threw everything at me in a space of 2 hours. And I'm gonna describe all the things that they did, right? Because I mean, I'm not saying this these things to vent or anything. It's because they're traceable, and these things were ultimately committed by people that are here in the United States. And if authorities get them, they will probably talk, and this will all trace back to the Chinese. I'm pretty sure. So, and the Venezuelans, of course, right? And Diosdado Cabello specifically. And Andres Salvador Mendez. He's like the local actor, right? So anyhow, the first thing they did, right, when they saw that I registered, because if to file these patents online, you have to open an account with in the portal of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. The second I did this around 9 a.m. U.S. Central Time. Minutes after, my car insurance sends me an email and a voicemail, basically telling me that they've been trying to contact me because of the accident of last week of March 3rd. Sorry. But I am unresponsive. Like, the email is worded in a way that makes me look like a crazy person, right? That I got into an accident and I don't even want to talk to the insurance, something like that, right? It's worded in a not aggressive, but like passive-aggressive way, right? So they sent me that. Their hope is, for the Chinese, right? They were hoping that I would stop what I was doing. This is the harassment that they do to everybody, right? When they see that you're going to do something that goes against what they want, they distract you with something else, right? They put something in front of you that takes your attention away from the issue. Going west, right? Yes. So they sent me that email worded that way, and I think the idea was that I would get distracted. They thought, right, that I would get distracted and I would start chasing the insurance and fighting with the insurance and explaining that it wasn't my fault and looking at the videos. I didn't do any of that, right? Because that's not my priority. My priority is getting the Chinese, stopping the Chinese from getting the quantum computers. So, but that's the first thing they did, right? When they saw that I did not respond to that, they sent the USPS mailman, the second most interesting mailman in the world. And he was holding a package in his hands, like hugging it, that looked interesting because it was a larger package, right? So, of course, I think this was designed, so I thought, oh, this is the Supreme Court filings that I sent. So they returned the Supreme Court filings, right? I think it was designed with that in mind, right? So I would stop what I was doing to start fighting with the Supreme Court clerk for the rejection of the documents, right? But I did not open the door, right? Because I know that whatever it is, I don't know what he's holding, but whatever it is designed to distract me, and I'm not going to get distracted. Now, but this is important. The mailman did not leave the package. He took it back with him, and he left a notice that he was there in my mailbox. I saw him writing the notice, and I saw him putting it in the mailbox, okay? And he left. Then there was the rules with ID me, okay? Now, this is kind of a huge weakness that I see on this patent system, right, that we have, is that to be able to register into this system and file an application for a patent, you have to be registered with ID.me, which is a company, it's a private company, a private entity that provides identity identification services. And surprise, surprise, is heavily controlled by the Chinese. So in reality, the Chinese control or heavily influence who can even access the portal for the patents. Imagine that, right? Imagine the power that gives the Chinese. So of course, when I tried to register, I couldn't. My account got blocked. It said that it couldn't find my social security number, like all sorts of technical problems. It took me the entire morning fighting with the people from support to be able to actually get past this problem, right? But I did. After, I don't know, like at 2 p.m., I was able to register into the system. 1 second, because they activated the L2s, okay. Which seem to be gray tonight. So yes, so, they burned all my morning into that. Of course, at that point, they haven't seen the patents. They don't know what I have, right? Because I built this patent locally with my cluster in my home, like, using the data sets that I already have. So they have no idea what I have, but they know it's something related to a patent, right? So they're trying to stop it. So they did already these three things: the insurance, the USPS mailman with a rejection letter from the clerk of the U.S. Federal Supreme Court, right? So the Supreme Court of the United States. Which is interesting, right? Because this means that they got that rejection, but they had not delivered it, right? So they were holding it in reserve as a weapon, right? And only when they saw that I was going to do this thing with the patents, they decided to, these people are going to cause an accident with these trucks today. I can see it coming. They're doing the same intentionally, right? Where they're driving these trucks very close to my car, or, honking the. Yeah, remember the pattern of racketeering we talked about, right? Okay. So yes. So this means that this USPS mailman, right, or whoever controls him, had this package from the U.S. Supreme Court days ago, and they just hadn't bring it back to me. The reason is because they saw the last time they brought the package, I replied by filing a new application. So they didn't want to give me the rejection, so I didn't have anything in writing, written, that could justify me filing another application. You see? So it was a way of obstructing justice, really. So there was a rejection, but I didn't know about it because they were holding it with the USPS. But they only choose to release it to me when they saw that it was more dangerous if I filed the patent application. You see? But anyhow, that's what they did. And the mailman took the package with him and left a notice and left. And then after I was able to get into the portal, I had another problem, which is that, and this is described before, right, where they have been doing what I've called the credit card strangulation with Chase, in which they have lowered the credit limit of my credit card from something like $60,000 to $6,000. So I cannot pay for the $7,000 Google Cloud bill every month. So to give chances of rejection, like if my credit card has any balance on it, the Google Cloud bill could be rejected and my Google Cloud account could be closed, right? They've done this, this is old, right? But the problem I had is that the Google Cloud bill had just come in and the balance in the account was something like $7,000. I can't recall exactly how much it was, but it was basically maxed out, right? So I had to pay the credit card to be able to pay for the patent applications, which are expensive, right? So what they did is this: when I go to the Chase bank to pay for the credit card balance, the website gives me an error saying this feature of the website is not working right now, meaning I could not pay the credit card. Right now, I don't know if this was targeted to my account or if they did this, they took the entire system online for everybody, right? So it doesn't look targeted. I don't know the answer to that because I only have one online account with Chase. But I have to tell you, I could not pay for the credit card, right? And if I don't pay for the credit card because it's already at the limit that they intentionally lower it to, I cannot pay for the patent applications, right? So I cannot effectively apply for a patent. So they were blocking my application with the patent office in this way as well, right? That's it. Yes. Yes. So they did that, right? But this is interesting because this would be the third time Chase Bank blocks me from doing something important, weaponizing my account that I have there. This is the third time, and the other two are documented before. I'm not going to repeat them, but this is the third serious incident, right? Of Chase or the network weaponizing my accounts at Chase to obstruct justice or to obstruct my access to a federal system. So they hit me with that as well, right? At the end, because I had the debit cards, what I did was to transfer money to the checking account and then pay with a debit card that they cannot, because it's not a credit card, it's actual cash that I have in that account. I could, pay for the patents with the debit card. So that's what I did. Now, I have to tell you about the USPS guy, right? Now, I think, and this is more of a question I want to ask to the informant, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask this question, is that they are in an emergency mode. Because what I'm seeing in the movements of these people that are in the houses next to me, it looks like they're performing a deep extraction protocol right now in all these houses. It feels like people and things are being extracted from these houses. So please tell me if that's the case, because if that's the case, that will be material information for me to have, right? But anyhow, the interesting thing is that today, Sunday, the second most interesting mailman in the world, the same one that did this thing on Friday with the package, brought the package and left it on my doorstep, contradicting himself, because on Friday he didn't want to leave it and he left a notice, right? Like implying that it requires signature. But today it did not require signature, and it's the same package, right? So why does it require signature on a Friday, but on Sunday it doesn't? My theory is that they having that package is a form of obstruction, and because they got in trouble, that's why I think they're removing people from the neighborhood, right? Because they got in trouble. Something happened that I don't know. I don't know what it is, but something must have happened. And now they being in possession of that package is a form of obstruction of justice that is demonstrable. So they have to get rid of that package quickly, right? They have to explain it as, oh, the mailman made a mistake and thought it requires signature, but it doesn't really require signature, right? So he delivered it to them, right? But you know, I think the fact that that it's on itself a contradiction. He's contradicting himself. He's taking two different procedures for the same package on 2 different days, depending on the situation, right? Now, there's something else I have to tell you, and I have also a question for the informant here. It's about the Suburban, this car that I'm driving today. There was a break-in. They broke into the car on Friday, on Thursday. So this was the day before I filed the patents. I started filing the patents. They broke into the car on Thursday evening, right? And I uploaded the recordings to the Google Cloud Bucket so the FBI can get them, right? So, you know, maybe this is what triggered the panic. I don't know. But I don't think so, right? Because they've done these things before and I get them in camera and this doesn't determine. So I think it's something else. Maybe one of the judges got in trouble. I don't know, right? I don't know if it's the judge that is doing the... I don't know. I don't want to speculate. So, but please, informant, tell me what it is, right? Is that the switcheroo happened? Like, I don't know. Like, because, you know, I run in models, that the system that I have, I anticipated that, you know, if the DOJ or FinCEN or FAC or somebody like that is watching this, they're probably going to take action in that court where KP George is having his trial on the 10th. So in 2 days from now, 1 day, because it's already Monday. So tomorrow, Tuesday, is a trial. The trial starts, right? So, you know, one thing that at least in the movies I see is that, you know, sometimes they change the judges, right, at the last minute. So I don't know, maybe something like this happened. They brought a new judge and this is what triggered the panic, right? Could be, I don't know. So please tell me what is exactly that is happening, right? I'm talking to my, you know, beloved informant. Anyhow, they broke into the Suburban, okay? And the other question I have here, because this informant told me months ago that, like, he gave me kind of a class of, you know, what are the places where they usually put the box in. And I'm going to say this so people know, right? In case you're being followed by the Chinese, you know where to look. So the usual places are in the windshield wipers. What they do when you park your car somewhere, they replace the wipers. Because these are cartridges, right? They're things, and basically what you have to look for are things that are easy to replace, that are interchangeable easily, and that have a clear line of sight to the windshield or to the sun. And this is important because, for example, those wipers that the Chinese manufacture, they have a battery and a small solar panel. So they get powered by the sun, and they store this power in the battery, and then that's the way the electronics inside of this box windshield wiper operates, right? So that's why it's important that it's on the windshield, right? So it gets the sun. And also so they can interrogate it via radio frequency short range, right? So those are the two important properties. So one is the windshield wipers. The other place is the rear view mirror, because they can just replace it very quickly with one that is bought with electronics. The other one that he told me, I think, was the sun visors. So you see all the things that are close to the windshield, right? That are replaceable very quickly. So because they need to make this replacement while you are at Walmart, right? Or while you're shopping for something, right? it cannot be something deeply integrated with the car, and it has to be something that they can deploy in any car in any country, right? So those are the properties that you need to be looking for. So anyhow, my question is, because if they broke into the car, I imagine it's because they wanted to bug this car with audio, with something, with a GPS or with a signal analyzer to understand how is that I'm communicating, right? So my leading theory right now is the rear view mirror, because this thing has a cable that has 12 volts power. So, I imagine if they want to put a spectrum analyzer, they need power for that, right? They need a processor. So my leading candidate is that. The second thing I would think of is the sun visors, because they also have power because they have the light, right? But, probably they have less power. So I don't know. If you can tell me what it is so I can disconnect it, right? I would appreciate that. Of course, I'm not going to transmit or receive any messages today because I don't know what it is exactly and what it is, right? But anyhow, they broke into the car. The recordings are in the Google Cloud bucket called Mobile 2024, Google Cloud Storage, right? Bucket. Called Mobile 2024. And you will get them, right? I'm talking to the authorities. So, but I imagine this is not exactly what triggered the panic. Although, now this is a physical evidence, right, of the Chinese doing this, right? This racketeering to steal intellectual property. And I imagine right now they must be in panic with the geopolitical implications of the patents about, optical communication, parallel communication in this way. One thing I didn't mention, because to make it super clear, this thing I was describing of this communication method, if you think about it, is like using every pixel in a screen as a single fiber optic channel, right? It's not fiber optic, but it's the same principle. It's like traveling to encode a signal, right? But the difference is that this one is parallel. You have millions of these tiny fiber optics, if you think about it that way. And they encode not only ones and zeros, they encode millions of different states, right? They can encode up to millions of different states, each pixel. And the position is also something that encodes meaning, right? Like, if it's the pixel at the position 00, that means something. If it's the pixel at the position 01, it means something else, right? So the cardinality of encoding possibilities is immense, and this is what gives the bandwidth and the parallelism of this, right? And also, if you need more bandwidth, all you have to do is get a bigger screen. Right? So you can not only parallelize it, but you can also increase the resolution, right? If you increase the resolution, you get more bandwidth. Yes, so what I was saying is, because I imagine, right, in the level of desperation the Chinese must be right now. I mean, when I say the Chinese, I don't mean the people of China. I mean the Communist Party of China specifically, right? I imagine the objective was to bug the car, right? And this particular car that I'm using right now, because it's armored, and you see why I have to drive around in an armored car. This is not because I'm paranoid. It's because these people are criminals, right? I mean, the Communist Party of China are a terrorist organization that use terror to steal information related to the intellectual property. That's what it is, right? Like in the 80s, the world had to deal with drug cartels. And today, we have to deal with drug cartels working in combination with the Communist Party of China to steal intellectual property, right? That's the new goals: information and intellectual property, right? Yes, so anyhow, they broke into the Suburban on March the 5th, and the videos are in the Google Cloud Storage bucket. Now, as this was happening, right, that I was checking the videos to get them, right, from my camera system, they started, this is amazing, right? They started rebooting the Chinese, like the people next door. They started power cycling my camera system. So they have control to reboot the camera system of my home. Imagine that, right? And I started, okay, because they were desperate, right? Because what they were trying to do was to make it difficult for me to get the video so I would forget. right? So I would get distracted and do something else because this is physical evidence, right? But it let me understand, as they were doing this, my countermeasure was I started running ablation experiments with them, right? Meaning I started, changing components to understand how they were doing it. I narrow it down to three things. One is the UPSs, so the interrupted power supplies that I have. To tell you, those I bought at Amazon, and they have a way to make them flicker, right? To interrupt the power of the power supply for a few milliseconds. And this, of course, makes the whatever you have connected to it reboot. And this gives them a window of opportunity to break in, to do whatever, right? But imagine, and this is really dangerous. What this really means, because if you're buying a UPS in Amazon, is because you have something that needs uninterrupted power. It's something sensitive, like a camera system, right? But if the Communist Party of China has a remote control that they can use to power cycle it or to turn it off, imagine, right? Your most important electronics, because if you're protecting them with a UPS, is because you need them to be always on, right? They can turn them off with a remote control from the house next door, right? This is very dangerous, right? And these were sold to me at Amazon. Now, I have to tell you, when a few weeks ago, I went to Micro Center and I bought new UPSs because I already knew the informant had told me that these were bugged, but I thought they were bugged only with audio. I did not foresee that they could reboot them, right? Well, surprise, the one I bought at Micro Center, they can also turn it off. And I'm telling you this because they were doing this thing, turning off the cameras for like an hour. And this gave me a lot of opportunities to test different combinations. At the end, I got to a situation where they cannot reboot it, right? But it took me an hour of experiments. So the two UPSs are bugged. The one I bought at Amazon and the one that I bought at Micro Center. It's up to the authorities to determine how they bugged them. If Amazon was in it, if Micro Center was in it, or if it's the manufacturers or the supply chain of the manufacturers that have a common component that the Chinese bought from China. I don't know, right? This requires more investigation. The other thing that I discovered was the cable. The HDMI cables that I bought at Amazon are also bugged. They transmit, but also they seem to have the capability to reboot the equipment. And I have to tell you, here I have to do more research. I don't recall exactly the specifications, but I think, and don't quote me on this, I might be wrong, but I think the HDMI specification has a feature in it that protects the device against short circuits. And the way it does it is that if the board of the computer or the video card detects a short circuit on the HDMI cable, it sends a reboot signal to the motherboard, right? And this is to protect the motherboard and the CPU, right? But I think, and this is a theory, I don't have a way to test this, but I think what the Chinese did is that they weaponized this. How? Well, imagine that you build a cable, an HDMI cable that has a radio frequency receiver, and when it gets a particular signal, it causes this specific short circuit to cause a reboot on the equipment, right? So they could, if this is what they did, this means that with those special HDMI cables they manufacture, they could basically reboot any computer in the world at will that are using those cables. Imagine that, right? Super dangerous. They could reboot computers at NASA or at, the FBI, whatever, right? If they're using these bulk cables. Yes. So the HDMI cables, right? And they also, the ones I have at least, transmit radio frequency. They basically said kind of a snapshot of what I'm looking at the screen. Imagine that, right? So if I'm working in a pattern, or if I'm looking, even the ones that were in the security cameras don't have these features. Meaning that the Chinese agents next door on the 221A that are very close to this room where I have this monitor with the cameras, they were basically looking at my cameras all the time. And this is what helps them breaking into the Suburban, right? because they can see the cameras from the house next door. They can understand the angles, right? And they can even real time coordinate with the agent, move to, like, basically the technique is, make the agent, move around the perimeter of the house in a way that the camera almost cannot see him, right? But it wasn't perfect. But the technique is, like walking next to the wall, right? Behind the bushes and things. And they can do this, and they can coordinate with the agent real time because they can see the cameras, right? Because the cable and the monitor are transmitting, both items are transmitting. So even if I replace the cable, they still get me with the monitor because the monitor is also bugged in the same way. And this monitor was it was sent to me really by Andrés Salvador Méndez via Zuleima, right? She brought the monitor because what happened was when I got the geo index in 2024 on September 11th, I understood what it meant, and I understood the danger having that information represented to my life, right? So what I did, I started going out from the house to buy things, and I would rely on Gloria/Zuleima to buy things for me. So I would tell her, and I remember I put more cameras, and I asked her to buy these monitors to connect them to the camera system so I could monitor the cameras from any room. Well, what Andrés Salvador Méndez was that he gave her or instruct her to buy specific monitors that were bought, right? That's how they injected the monitors into the home. The bulk monitors for the cameras. So in short, the Chinese next door can see the camera. So what they have is that the agent is wearing an earpiece, and they're telling the agent real time, move to the left, move to the right, right? I imagine, right? I didn't hear the conversation, but it seems that way. So they guide the agent with audio on how to move to evade, and they're monitoring the cameras, right? From the house next door. I mean, it's so dangerous, right? To me, to my safety, right? I mean, there's these monitors and these cables. But that's how they do it. Now, one interesting thing, because I have to tell you, the break-in also happened because I made a mistake. When I parked the Suburban outside, and I was lazy, and I didn't want to park it in the driveway right away. I left it outside, and I turned off the cameras of the car to save battery, relying on the cameras that I have mounted on the house, right? But they guided the agent in this intricate way to kind of avoid, but they failed, like they failed miserable. But I had behind I will have to describe the layout, right? But if you look at my house, where the garage is, I have 2 Blink cameras, and Blink is a company that is owned by Amazon, okay? And those cameras are connected to a Starlink antenna, so they go straight to the satellites, right? And I'm relying on those cameras. I'm thinking they're not going to break into the car because I have those cameras there, right? But what this means is that and I checked those cameras, there's no footage of the break-in in the Blink cameras. So this means that they either compromise the footage of the cameras via Amazon/Blink, or they turn off the Starlink communication, right? So nothing would be recorded in Blink. But either way, it makes necessary coordination with actors inside either of these 2 corporate entities. Because otherwise, this person would have been recorded by the cameras, by the Blink cameras, and they weren't. They were recorded by the hardware cameras, but not by the Blink cameras. But this means coordination with either Blink or Amazon. I don't know which one, but it's up to the authorities to investigate this, right? One second. I'm just going through my talking points to see what I'm missing. Yes, this is important. So the informant also told me last week, I haven't mentioned this, but he told me that the handbags of Zuleima that were in the closet were bugged. And that was why Andres Salvador Mendez was so interested, and Morgan Heibner and William Kyle Adams, they were so interested in recovering them as part of the quote-unquote divorce, because they're bought, right? So, but I have them, so, all authorities have to do is conduct an inspection of these bugs, and I imagine, right, they will discover the bugs. The other thing I want to tell you is about my Google account. There's two things that I saw that are anomalies that were concerning. So this is the account that is rinaldo@rinaldo.ca. One of the things is that if I looked at my account in the past devices that open sessions in this account, there is a mysterious device that is called Sebas, and it's supposed to be a phone. And I have to tell you, I don't recognize this device, and I have this account set up with super high security. It's something they call at Google Advanced Protection Program, right? That requires a biometric key. So I don't see how this device could have signed into the account, because I haven't given that key to anybody, right? So this is concerning, how they created this sign in, right? And the other thing is that in this account, there is a phone number, which I'm going to give you the phone number because I imagine this is traceable, right? 1 second. The phone number is, so this phone number is associated to the account as if it was my phone number. It's 346-307-0038. I'm going to repeat that. It's 346-307-0038. And I have to tell you, I used to own this phone number, like in 2020, something like that. But I canceled that phone number years ago. And I've been trying to remove it from this account multiple times, but I can't. Every time I click on remove, it gives me an error, right? I don't know. It crossed my mind that maybe what they did is when I canceled the phone number, they reassigned it to somebody, to the Communist Party of China, and now they have a phone number that can be used as a second method of authentication for this account. And because they have somebody at Google that can help them, they can make it so that with this phone they can authenticate. And maybe that's how they created this sign-in, right? I don't know. It occurred to me. But I mean, this must be traceable, right? Because I imagine the NSA has supervisory powers over all the cell phones in the US, and this is a US cell phone, right? So this is probably traceable exactly how the Communist Party of China is using this phone number. Now, the other thing I want to tell you in this demo, it's kind of a closing thought that I want to give you, is about, if you look at the last 2 or 3 demos, when I talk about this hypothetical organism, right, that I've classified, analyzed, of the judges, right, being kind of a separate species at this time that are doing this thing, right? And I talked about the reproductive organ, being the elected official that at different levels, has the power to name judges. There is one thing that I haven't really said, but to me it's obvious, right? Because I have the data, and I've worked on this problem for a few years at this point. But one question that you have to ask yourself is, how does the Communist Party of China scales this design globally, right? Because the officials are elected, right? And the officials are elected, and they're necessary for the creation of the judges, right? To create new judges, you need the elected official. So how is that the Communist Party of China scales this globally, right? When all these officials are elected. This requires a specialized piece of technology that we haven't talked about. I talked about this in a demo a long time ago, but we haven't talked about this recently. But this is the missing piece, right? I want to give you the missing piece so you can get the entire picture. So the missing piece is the election technology companies, right? There's a particular one that is of Venezuelan origin, and the co-founders of that company are from the same university that I attended to. They graduated a couple of years before I did, or a few years, I don't know, like 5 years before I did. But they are from the same university, right? So, but it's not a coincidence that they're Venezuelans, right? because they're working in this network for Diosdado Cabello, right? So that's the way it works with the elections technology companies. The Communist Party of China assures that they can elect who they want to elect, right? And so this guy almost crashed into my car. They by doing that, they elect whoever they want to elect. And after they do that, they can name all the judges. So in reality, what you're seeing is the judiciary capturing the executive power. That's really what's happened, right? In engineering, we have this term we call postmortem, right? Where, when something happened, you do this exercise of analyzing what happened and how it happened, what went wrong, right? So if we did a postmortem of this situation, right, that the Communist Party of China created over the last 3 decades, is basically that what went wrong is the executive power being captured by the judiciary, but not just for the sake of capturing, but because there is a self-serving motivation of the judiciary in doing that, is that by capturing the executive, they can assure the creation of new judges and keep the racket going, right? So you see, that seems like a weakness to me, at least. That seems like a weakness in the design of the democratic systems, because the separation of power cannot exist really if one branch names the officers in the other. But you would think, right? It's kind of counterintuitive, because you would think that that what would happen is that the judiciary would be serving the executive, right? Because then, they owe the favor, right? The people personally, right, that got appointed would owe a favor, right, to the person that appointed them, right? They would be naturally inclined to make them happy, right, in a way, right? You would think that. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that the judiciary actors collectively are capturing the executive power to assure that they themselves can name new judges. Right? It's counterintuitive, but that's what happened, right? But this wasn't designed by the judiciary officers. This is really the Communist Party of China behind the scenes. Because when they set up this situation and they allow the judges to capture power and democracy in this way, they control the judges as well, right? And how they exert control? Well, because they have the intelligence apparatus, right? That Robert Mueller map reduce. So if a judge misbehaves, what they will do is that, because at the same time they're doing all this, they are capturing real-time evidence of all the crimes that the judge could be committing, himself, personally, or herself, right? So if a judge misbehaves, what the Communist Party of China will do is they will turn this evidence into a case, and they will put the judge in prison, right? They will prosecute the judge. So they have leverage over the judge because they are in knowledge of the crimes committed by the judge. You see, so the judge have to be servant. They have no choice. So the judge captures the executive, uses the executive to create more judges, and at the same time, the Communist Party of China holds absolute power over all the judges because they are in knowledge and have proof of the crimes. You see? So at the end, that's how the Communist Party of China controls the world. But all of this is possible because of the use of the elections technology companies that allow the Communist Party of China to trick the elections to put in power people that they want to put in power, to then be able to appoint the judges to keep the racket going. You see, so it's a self-reinforcing cycle any way you look at it. But the ones that are really capturing democracy are the judges, not the presidents or the governors. They're in a way tools, right? They're being used by the judges. But the ones that are controlling the governmental systems locally in different countries are the judges, not the politicians. Right? The politicians are tools, but the real controlling is a controlling body, right? It's like a committee, right, of judges. That's who is running societies at this point. But to serve really the interests of the Communist Party of China to steal technology and exert control and domination over everybody else. So I know it's a heavy topic, but it has to be said, right? So with that, I'm gonna close this demo 121, and I'm gonna go home and put this on the internet and on my books, of course. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you on the next one.